Tonight, you've got to watch this. The daughters of the woman murdered by one of the 141 people the government let out of immigration detention without any controls. Astonishing scandal. These women are scared, no wonder. Plus, a local council votes against those acknowledgments to traditional owners that we hear all the time. One of the councillors tells us why, and why so many of his colleagues are scared, too scared to talk about it. Also tonight, the Weather Bureau told us this would be a dry month. They panicked farmers into selling stock, but they were wrong. Look at the rain. Should we trust them now on global warming? And Labor divided. Labor MPs and unions complain this government is too soft on Israel. But independent MP Bob Katter meanwhile releases a fiery video saying Muslims who hate Jews should be weeded out.
But don't come here to my country.
And finally, have the producers of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here panicked at making Nigel Farage look so good, claims now of dirty work and censorship. But first, the scandal of the free detainees just gets worse. More evidence today of the shiftiness and incompetence of Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill. I think she's misled us. As we've been discussing for days now, O'Neill let 141 people out from immigration detention, including murderers, rapists, an assassin, and a child rapist too, without any proper control. Now, it's true, it's the High Court that said let them out. But it turns out that even after months where she should have got ready for this day, should have taken precautions for your safety, public safety, she didn't. Now, I know Claire O'Neill gets very upset hearing about all this. In fact, just today she was complaining about the opposition asking her questions that in her now trademark style she actually won't answer.
I see that the opposition's had a little bit of a meeting this morning and they've decided that they're going to spend today making a political attack on me. Well, congratulations.
But to the latest question today about her truthfulness, let's start with the background. Now, O'Neill comes up with different stories to explain how she and the government totally caught out with that High Court decision a couple of weeks ago. That was when the court said it had to free a Burmese pedophile from immigration detention because no country would take him back and the government couldn't go around punishing people with indefinite detention, right? Now, because of that decision, the government also had to release another 140 other detainees in a similar position. Now, clearly the government was caught flat-footed because it just let them all out, all these hardened criminals, without monitoring, curfews, and not even for an assassin who'd murdered a young woman, supposedly on the orders of a Malaysian politician. Nothing. Now, O'Neill's excuse has been this, but I was told we were going to win this case.
You knew this could happen in June, though, didn't you, or did you?
We knew that there was a High Court action on foot. We knew that it was 20 years of legal precedent, and we were advised that it was likely that the Commonwealth would win the case, that is, allow us to do what we wanted to do, which is keep these people in detention.
Minister, who advised you were likely to win, and how recently did you receive that advice?
Well, we received that advice from the Department of Home Affairs, who tell us what chances we have of success and failure in each legal case. But I do need you to understand that
when did you receive that advice?
I do need you to understand that our department is one of the most litigated against departments of the Commonwealth.
As you see, O'Neill doesn't do answers, right? But then our Sky News political editor, Andrew Clennell, found out that O'Neill, far from being confident she'd win the High Court case, was frantically trying in August and September, and it seems even October, right up to the High Court decision, to get some other country, like America, to take this child rapist off our hands. So she could then go to the court and say, well, Your Honour, the pedophile is now out of the country, so there's no need for the case to continue and for you to make a decision. Okay? That is the trick that O'Neill then admitted to Clennell this week after his scoop, saying, well, actually, yes, that's what I really meant. I was given operational advice from my department that we could remove this guy from Australia, and then the case would not have to proceed. I was not referring to legal advice at all. Well, she could have fooled us, the way she'd put it, but anyway. Now, of course, no country wanted our child rapists. Are you kidding? But even now, here we get to it. That turns out to be only half the story of this incompetence, right? And the fact is that there's now even less excuse for the government being caught so unprepared for releasing 141 people, like I say, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, whatever, an assassin, without even basic monitoring, until the opposition kicked up a stink and they passed rush legislation, ankle monitors and the whole thing. That's because the reason it's even worse now, court documents show that O'Neill and the government actually knew back in May, and that's like 6 months ago, that there was just about no hope on God's earth that some other country would take this Burmese child rapist known as NZYQ. In fact, the government actually admitted to the High Court itself back in May this very thing. It must have known it was odds on, that the court would then tell it. It would therefore have to free this detainee and others just like him. And the opposition's immigration spokesman Dan Tien, having seen this court documents, an admission in May, asked about exactly that today and got, yes, another O'Neill non-answer.
On 30 May 2023, the government told the High Court it was an agreed fact that there was no, quote, no real prospect of NZYQ being removed from Australia in the reasonably foreseeable future. Yet reports in The Guardian show just last week the Minister for Home Affairs said she had operational advice about the case and that it was likely that the government would, quote, avoid it by deporting him. Did the Minister sign off on the facts that the government put before the High Court on 30 May 2023?
I will make no apologies for doing everything within my power to deport this person from our country. I'm not going to apologise that.
That woman answers questions like Linda Burney and the Prime Minister himself did during the Voice debate, right? They answer it by not answering them at all. It's a trademark of this government. So much for, openness and all that kind of thing, accountability, let the light in. So this is the issue. O'Neill did or should have known 6 months ago she'd have to release 141 people, many of them serious criminals, but she didn't prepare for it. She gave an excuse for this. I was told we'd win. But when that was exposed, she said, well, I actually meant I was told we could get rid of this detainee. But now we know she couldn't or shouldn't have believed that either at the time that she said so. How can this incompetent, sneaky minister stay in this job? Now, for the first time, many of us are hearing Brittany Higgins speak under oath about her alleged rape by Bruce Lehrmann, a fellow Liberal staffer, alleged rape in Parliament House, which Lehrmann, of course, denies. Higgins took the stand today as part of Lehrmann's defamation trial against Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson, in which he claims they ruined his life by essentially identifying him long before his criminal trial, which, by the way, was then called off last year without a verdict. So he's suing them. Now, this is what bothers me. The proceedings are being streamed live on YouTube. And I think, great, open justice and all that kind of thing. But I have to say, listening to Higgins today describe her alleged rape, I wondered how fair it was to show this to the world. I mean, it was excruciating. Now, I'll tell you just a bit, but I won't include intimate details I thought should never have been broadcast to a public of God knows who. Higgins said, for instance, the first thing I remember when I woke up was the pain in my legs. This is after a drunken night out. She had fallen asleep at Parliament House. Pain in my legs, Bruce was on top of me. And then came details that no rape victim or even alleged rape victim, right? Even if maybe they misremember, I don't care. No woman should be having to give these details with a camera stuck in their face and the world watching. People in court, fine, that has to be, and I mean, it's not a criminal trial here, fine. But the whole wide world? I can't even tell you what the details were. Later, though, she did tell of her reaction after this alleged rape in Parliament House. And her rape, I will underline, that Lehrmann strongly denies. She said, by the end of when she woke up in the morning after allegedly being raped, she was so distraught, she sat down, she found biscuits in the office, chocolate, and she ate a whole box of it, right? And all that kind of thing. Well, fine. Anyway, by the end of this case, I tell you what, someone is going to be absolutely ruined, either Higgins or Lehrman. But joining me at the latest in this case that seems to last forever is Sky News reporter Julia Bradley. Julia Bradley, thank you for joining me. You've been there. It's obviously been an emotional day for Brittany Higgins in the witness stand.
It has, Andrew. Brittany Higgins became incredibly emotional today as she was giving evidence as part of this defamation trial, which Bruce Lehrman has launched against Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson. She had to pause it several times as she was giving evidence, as she recounted her recollection of that night when she was allegedly raped by Mr Lehrman at Parliament House back in 2019. Now, she spoke about the alleged incident in graphic and distressing detail, explaining to the court how she became completely obliterated after drinking 11 vodka-based drinks while with colleagues at a bar in Canberra. She also spoke about her recollection of Mr Lehrman becoming handsy with her at a nightclub hours before this alleged rape. She then said she remembers waking up at Parliament House, allegedly mid-rape, saying she repeatedly asked Mr Lehrman to stop. Now, in the days following this alleged incident, she said she felt scared, shocked and started having panic attacks. And she said she decided to take a photo of her bruised leg when she became dissatisfied with how the claim was being handled. And she recalled this from a meeting with her former boss, Senator Linda Reynolds, and her chief of staff. She said the minister said, "I'm sorry." She said these are things that women go through. She said, "If you go to the police, please keep us updated. I didn't think he was capable of this." Now, Ms Higgins also said she felt like she was given an ultimatum to move back to her home on the Gold Coast and be paid out or relocate to Western Australia. This was during the 2019 election. She claims that when she decided to move to Western Australia, the minister was avoiding her, and she said that she felt really suicidal at the time and really alone. Now, as we know, Network 10 is fighting claims that a 2021 interview that Lisa Wilkinson did with Ms Higgins on the project defamed Mr Lehrman. But Channel 10 is seeking to prove there's truth in this report. Now, Ms Higgins is just one of more than 20 witnesses that Network 10 is preparing to call during the course of this 4-week trial. And Andrew, Mr Lehrman has always denied these rape allegations.
And some of the other witnesses, no doubt, will challenge other parts of the story. We don't know. I have to say, Julia, the graphic details of the rape itself, if a rape did occur, I thought was right out of order to broadcast to the waiting world. I just felt really uncomfortable with it, but maybe that's just me. Thank you so much indeed for your time, Julia Bradley. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Andrew.
Now, finally, a rebellion. I think a lot of you will probably be cheering this one. If there's one thing that really seems to give a lot of Australians the pip, it's these constant acknowledgments of country and the traditional owners, like you're strangers in your own land as well. At the start of a meeting, you know how it goes, or the start of Parliament, or the start of speeches, or the bottom of official letters, or even on your bills at supermarkets or whatever, or when your plane lands, you know the drill. We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country and their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to the people, the cultures and the elders past, present and emerging. Well, one regional South Australian council has had enough. It's voted to stop reading an acknowledgement of country at meetings and to scrap it from all official council correspondence. Now, it was a close vote, 5 votes for to 4 against, and it will have to be retaken at the next meeting because no notice was given before this vote. And let's see if some of them hold their nerve, because a lot of the councillors are now running for the hills. There's a real fear of getting picked on. The mayor won't say how she voted. The deputy mayor won't comment. Another councillor said, "Oh, I need permission to speak." The councillor who actually moved this motion, Hank Langis, is giving no interviews. He doesn't want to be on the national stage, he says. But he did tell me why he did this. He said, "I don't have problems with respect for elders, but we shouldn't respect one race and forget all migrants in the past and present that have made this country as it is today. So the one councillor who will speak is Tom Malone. Councillor Tom Malone, thank you so much for coming on the show. Why did your council vote to scrap the acknowledgement of country? What brought this to a head?
I think it was for different reasons for different people. So the councillors that have voted it up have not all got the same perspective on it, I'm sure. But for me, I honestly think that it's rather divisive. The council chamber of the Northern Areas Council sits on land that is contested between two groups. And I saw that manifest on a cultural awareness day that we had at a forest reserve not too far from where I live. And that's certainly why I'm no longer supporting it.
Well, how come so many of your colleagues don't seem to want to talk about what they did? Have been running for cover, wanting not to comment. What's all that about?
Well, as I'm sure you're all too aware, it's a very divisive topic at the moment, and we've seen that throughout the last 6 months, especially leading up into the referendum that we've just had. I'd be inclined to say no one would want to put their name or face to it.
Well, it's interesting because, on the other hand, I would have thought that a lot of your ratepayers would have been really for what you've just done. What's the response been?
Well, we haven't seen a response since the meeting from the ratepayers, but I'm very aware that most of the ratepayers in our area are essentially fed up with this constant acknowledging. But they're also aware of that contested title. And so, yeah, it's not real straightforward in our area here, that's for sure. And I think a lot of the ratepayers feel strongly with who they've traditionally identified with as traditional owners of the country, and that's the line has been shifted.
What about welcome to country ceremonies? What are you going to do about them?
We don't seem to have that many welcome to countries in our local area. Most of us, especially in the chamber, I believe, we support the welcome to countries at events and things like that because it's part of essentially the culture. It's the consistent acknowledgement that comes day in, day out that people here are fed up with.
And when you actually had your council meeting and you just voted for this, it seems the mayor doesn't want to say what she voted. I presume she was against. The deputy mayor told us, well, she's only deputy mayor for the moment, so I don't know what's going on there. She didn't want to comment either. Was it heated?
No, it struck me as quite odd. It went through rather quietly, but the formal process wasn't quite right, and so it will have to go back to the next council meeting for it to be correctly ratified. And then, yeah, there was no recount called, and so the individuals that voted it up or down obviously chose to remain anonymous in that, and I'll respect that sanctity of the chamber.
Well, very interesting stuff. And finally, Tom Malone, the voice referendum, did it clarify your thinking about this matter at all, or the thinking of your fellow councillors?
I think it definitely started this conversation about the acknowledgement, who we're acknowledging, what that means and what it looks like. Certainly the feeling of our community here was that the voice referendum was divisive. My personal opinion is that it's disgraceful to try and divide a country by race in its constitutional document. And I think we really need to be opening the conversation now as to what unity is going to look like as we move forwards. We're deeply divided in this country, and it's a problem. And continuing to acknowledge people that are divided. Yeah, and so the division that's exists in between the two Aboriginal nations that the Northern Areas Council sits on is a manifestation of this. They're being divided. The two groups of Aboriginal peoples are being divided by this. And so we need to be opening language that is unifying for not only these separate groups of Aboriginal people, but the whole of the community as Australians.
Well, I think a lot of people listening to you now would be saying absolutely. Tom Malone, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it.
No worries at all.
After the break, I'm going to speak to the two sisters who are now fearing for their lives after their mother's killer was released in this immigration detainee scandal. Plus, the rains this month. Where's that El Nino we were told to expect? How the Bureau of Meteorology got it so wrong. And it's now predicting global warming a century from now? You know our Bureau of Meteorology, it's been plugging the global warming scare for years, but you wonder how we can trust its predictions of what the climate will be in 50 years' time when it's just made a huge blue about the rains, well, that you're seeing right now. And it's a mistake that's cost farmers a lot. Just 2 months ago, the Bureau issued this long-range forecast, repeating a prediction of warmer and drier than average conditions, said they were likely across most of southern and eastern Australia from October to December. And that's after taking all influences into account, which of course included the El Nino. Now, a lot of farmers thought, well, you know, dry, they're not going to have food for their stock. Fodder costs a lot. Better sell the stock fast. As you saw, we discussed in the show, prices crashed. Except, as you can tell in many parts of this country, that forecast was dead wrong. True, October was dry. But this month, you check the rainfall so far. On this map, the Bureau of Meteorology, white, blue and purple means above average. So that's a lot of rain in particularly southern and eastern Australia. And by the way, the Bureau does keep underestimating the rain we do get. 16 years ago, it claimed that global warming was already drying up our dams. One of its top forecasters did a Flannery. He said, truth be known, climate change here is now running so rampant that we don't need meteorological data to see it. Almost every one of our cities is on the verge of running out of water. And our largest irrigation system, the Murray-Darling, is on the verge of collapse. Well, 16 years ago, we all know that was complete nonsense, and now it's completely wrong again. Joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt Canavan, good to see you. The Bureau 16 years ago says global warming causing cities to run out of water. Now we've got near record amounts of water in storage. In September, last September, it says November will be hot and dry. Now look, mistakes happen, but what conclusions do you draw?
Well, no doubt weather forecasting is a very tough game, Andrew, but the fact that we can't seem to get a forecast right for the next 3 months seems to me that we should be sceptical about the predictions that are made for the next 30 years. We should take them with a grain of salt. And ironically enough, I have noticed that it's been very, very wet down here in Canberra when you look out the window sometimes from this building. But we were also debating in the Senate today the government's anti-farmer Murray-Darling legislation. They want to take more water away from farmers because they're once again scaring everybody. There won't be enough water around in the future. I went back and had a look at some of the predictions as you have done on the show. And the CSIRO also predicted in 2007 that water runoff in the Murray-Darling would reduce by 15% by 2020. Totally wrong. It's been about the same over that period. It was much higher than during the Federation drought. Remember the Garneau report? Do you remember the Garneau report? There was a lot of heat about that back in 2008. Ross Garneau predicted that get to this one, Andrew, irrigated agriculture would fall by 92% by 2100. Now, we're a fair way from 2100 yet, but we're now 15 years on from his prediction, and I don't think we're on track for a 92% fall in Australian agriculture. In fact, it's been growing. I'd love to be reincarnated as a weather forecaster because these people are never, or I should say a climate forecaster, they're even better because they're never held accountable for their mistakes.
It's so true. I remember Ross Garneau. He installed a steel roof in his Melbourne home in case of monster hail. And these have real life consequences. You're talking about, if you get the predictions of runoff to the rivers wrong, then farmers have to pay for it with reduced irrigation because the government's taken it from them. I mean, seriously. Meanwhile, Matt, another false prediction. As you know, the government promised 18 months ago electricity bills are going to fall by $275, saying now, well, all this wind and solar power that it's going to give us, that, though, is going to push our electricity bills down. Here is Chris Bowen.
Renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy, and that includes when you include and count transmission and storage.
But Matt, that claim that the government keeps making that wind and solar are the cheapest and so power prices are going to fall has been directly contradicted by two top experts. One I mentioned last night, the head of our top electricity producer, saying there's a misunderstanding when people say renewables will be cheaper, will lead to cheaper generation costs. Wrong. This, in fact, will lead to higher costs in the short and medium term. And that's now been backed up by one of the managers of the Australian Energy Market Operator that oversees the electricity system. He says it is going to cost. Here he is.
I don't want to give the impression that energy transition isn't going to cost something, but because it is, and I think we do a disservice if we sort of say that it's not.
So, Matt, what gets me, why aren't more journalists livid about the government's deceit in this area?
Yeah, the government has been lying here, and unfortunately the estimates that Chris Bowen is relying on come from the same organisation, the CSIRO, that got the Murray-Darling forecast so wrong. These organisations seem to have been captured by ideology and are putting that ahead of the reality. And that is the reality is catching up. I mean, to have another reference back to the 2000s, Chris Bowen is a bit like that comical Ali figure. Remember comical Ali from the Iraqi invasion? He's standing in front of this electricity grid that is just crashing behind him, saying, "Don't worry, everybody, wind and solar is the cheapest form of power." And no matter how many times Chris Bowen says it, doesn't change the fact that the more we install of it, the higher your power bill gets. And eventually people will wake up to that reality. That is the hard, cold reality of living under this Labor Green government. You're paying more for energy, you're paying more for electricity. And until we change tack here and realise that we can't run a system based on weather-dependent energy sources, we'll keep suffering pain. So I don't know, there's pretty much no chance of Chris Bowen waking up. There's pretty much no chance of Anthony Albanese waking up. I suppose we're just lucky it's only 18 months to another election.
Absolutely. Matt Canavan, thank you so much indeed for your time. And now back to that High Court decision to release detainees, many of them criminals. It's been such a nightmare for the Albanese government. Made worse, as I said, by the government not being prepared for the High Court's decision, releasing them at first with no proper controls, although they've now apparently got ankle monitors and must report to police. But is that enough to stop a convicted murderer from killing someone again? And this shambles has included now something else. Family and friends of the victims of some of these detainees have been left in the dark and are now fearing for their lives, that their killers might come back to target them. One of those killers released by the government after the High Court decision is Iranian refugee Tony Kelasar. And warning, what he did was horrific. I'm not going to give you the whole details, but in November 1997, he murdered his wife, Svetlana Podgoyevsky, in Melbourne. She was on a work trip. He'd secretly followed her from Sydney, then drove her body back to Sydney where he tried to dissolve it in a vat of acid. I won't say more. Now, he was sentenced to 22 years prison. Since his release in 2019, he's been in immigration detention trying to find an order that his visa be cancelled and be sent back to Iran. But that won't accept him anyway. It doesn't take back people that don't want to go back. But now, there he is, Kelasar, roaming the streets with his ankle bracelet, don't worry. Joining me now is Svetlana's daughters, Sarah and Bianca. Sarah, thank you for your time. I'll start with you. How do you feel knowing that this man is walking around the streets at the moment with supposedly an ankle monitor? Does it make you feel safer?
Not at all. Unfortunately, the ankle monitoring system doesn't give us any assurance that we'll actually be kept away from this person. Look, he's very calculated, in what he did to our mother in 97. It was very calculated. He's able to, if he's out on the streets, he's able to find us, we feel. And we just got a lot of fear, a lot of discomfort knowing that he's allowed out and can just be in Australia.
Bianca, do you know where he is at the moment? And were you and your sister told he'd be released? Did you get plenty of warning?
Well, no, we don't know where he is. We didn't get any warning. I was told nothing. Yeah, like Sarah said, we're just absolutely terrified because we don't have any visibility. No one's communicating anything to us. We're in complete dark.
That's incredible. Sarah, you telling me neither of you were told? Has anyone been in contact with you to at least tell you where he might be or that he is out?
So I put myself on the victims register when I was a teenager, and because of that I was contacted on Monday to let us know retrospectively that he was released on Friday of last week. They weren't able to give us any specific details into his whereabouts, I guess the nature of his release, if he's allowed to travel interstate, anything like that. Unfortunately, we're not sure. We're not given any details into where he is.
Wow.
I'm
stunned. But Bianca, did Tony Kelleher try to contact you in the past at all? Do you know that he's interested in you guys?
We've always been kept sheltered of, if there was any communication, we were very young when this happened. So our auntie and uncle tried to shelter us as much as they could from this and try to give us the most normal upbringing as possible. So for this reason, we don't know if he's contacted us, and we don't want to know. But the fact of the matter is that he is, like Sarah said, very calculated. He has slipped through the cracks multiple times. He even entered in Australia back in 96 or 97 on a falsified passport, and got through past our government. So this is what we are afraid of, that this could happen again. The ankle monitor, the daily check-ins with the police, we don't know what that looks like. We don't know if that's going to be enough to keep him under control, or if he's if that's going to keep him away from us. But all of this combined is just giving us so much anxiety. Our mental health is deteriorating. I don't know about Sarah, but I've been able to sleep in, since this has happened. I stay awake at night thinking that someone's going to burst through my front door. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Wow. But Sarah, how do you feel the government and the High Court have handled this whole thing?
Yeah, unfortunately not very well at all. I think at the very least we deserve to be kept into the loop. We deserve to know where he is, what his whereabouts is, and also just the details of his release. I think to be told that he deserves a right to privacy over our right to knowledge about him, I think is just disgraceful, unfortunately. I think, as citizens of this country, we can't forget that he's not a citizen. We deserve to know what happens to him and where he is over his right to privacy.
I think if I threw that open to the viewers right now, you get 100% yes, indeed, you are right. But Bianca, what would you like the government now to do about all this?
I think there needs to be better communication to the victims and to the citizens of Australia that this actually affects. In a perfect world for us, we would like to see him deported back to his country, and serve whatever, face whatever punishment is waiting for him there. I would like to see our government stick up for us and put us first rather than a non-Australian citizen. And in a perfect world, that's what I would like to happen. What would you like to happen?
Absolutely.
Well, I feel like I wish I could do something for you ladies. I'm hoping someone from the government is listening, taking notes, and putting rockets up people's backsides, because this can't stand. Sarah and Bianca Katz, thank you so much indeed for your help. Really, for coming on. I really appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
After the break, the confronting video by Independent MP Bob Katter has been taking on anti-Semitism from Muslims here. Did he go too far? I'll let you decide. And Labor MPs revolt. They say the Albanese government is still too soft on Israel. I'm a bit puzzled why the federal government is now banning the Nazi salute. The South Australian government doing it too. The Victorian government's already done it. When Jews in Australia are facing so much hate, not so much from neo-Nazis at all, it's from the left and from some Muslims. I mean, neo-Nazis, of course, are an easy target. Who likes neo-Nazis? But, you know, they are very few around and, you know, strutting around in too tight black T-shirts, and they're a joke. And they're usually too brain dead to work as journalists and Greens politicians and actors and some Labor MPs and the sort of kind of people who are whipping up this insane anti-Israel hate. You know, the neo-Nazis aren't doing, these other people are. Today, for instance, a full-page ad by radical unions and others aimed at Israel, demanding it stop fighting back against those, well, they don't say, but I will, the terrorist regime in Gaza. So it was interesting then that independent federal MP Bob Katter, he posted a TikTok video that didn't take on neo-Nazis, but took on anti-Semitism from Muslims. Not all Muslims, of course, not at all. But he was pretty full on. Too much? Have a listen.
There are people in this country that are supporting this. They are a cancer on the soul of Australia, and they should be weeded out. And to think that that parliament and that government has done absolutely nothing about them, and we're just going to check out just how much a certain group in Australia may or may not be associated with a mosque in Sydney, how much control it has over the Labor Party. The great silence whilst human beings are being persecuted. But don't come here to my country and disgrace us by your filthy, low anti-Semitism.
Should have mentioned he was standing there with silhouettes of Jewish hostages still kept by the Hamas terrorist group in Gaza. Joining me is the panel, Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer, and Louise Elliott, business consultant and Hobart City Councillor. Michael, Katter's post there, your response?
I think it's unhinged, Andrew, and I think it's unhelpful as well. Look, you know my position. I'm a strong supporter of Israel. But the bottom line here is we've got a problem with people that are Australian citizens that are supporting, unfortunately, the slogans of Hamas, you know, and clearly that's a problem not going to be resolved by a rant by Bob Katter. It's got to be resolved by, firstly, what the government is doing, which I do support, banning symbols and, you know, flags and other paraphernalia from these terrorist organisations. In the case of the Nazis, that was the coalition that wanted to do that. And look, given the Jewish community supports that, I support that as well. Our problems are more fundamental than that. They need to get to basic education. What are we teaching these kids that are born in Australia that come up with these attitudes? What is our school system doing? What are our cultural institutions doing to ensure that they support our democratic values? I have no problem, as I said on many occasions, with people protesting. They can take a different view to me. What I have a real problem with is the hate speech, you know, the calls for anti-Semitism, the calls for genocide. That's what we need to be dealing with, and I don't think Bob Katter has added anything to that debate.
Louise Elliott, what do you make of it?
Well, I'm not as taken aback by Bob's TikTok. I can understand and appreciate his sentiment, to be honest, because we are in really troubling times and there's a lot of aggression out there. And I actually think there's a lot of people out there who are using symbols, whether it's the Palestinian flag or the from the river to the sea signs and things like that. There are some people who are using that to convey a message around peace and loss of human life, and that makes sense. But there are also a lot of it who, disturbingly, in Australia, are using that as a cover for their anti-Semitism. They do believe that Jewish people should not exist. And I've experienced something similar locally in the Hobart City Council, actually, where we had that signage and people that didn't agree with the messages around ceasefire and things like that. There was shame yelled out from the public gallery. And I think we really need to stamp out true aggression when we see it, because too often the government comes after easy targets, people like myself who speak the truth. And there's true aggression, there is true genocidal behaviour out there, and the government needs to stamp out that and actually prioritise it and be firm.
Meanwhile, Michael, Labor MPs and state Labor MPs from New South Wales, people from Sydney's West and others, went to Canberra to call on the Labor federal government to get tougher on Israel, you know, demand no more fighting. They were there with their Palestinian kafirs to show what side they were on when they met Labor ministers in Canberra, a couple of backbenchers there too. Labor seems very divided on this war. It seems like there's an anti-Israel left against the rest. What do you make of all this?
Well, that's fundamentally true, Andrew. There is a large element within the Labor Party, particularly in the left, that is anti-Israel, and they've been anti-Israel before these events, so let's not forget that. And it's the same phenomena you saw in the British Labor Party under their previous leader. So there is a fundamental problem. I mean, these people are firstly foolish for their actions. This was nothing more than a stunt for their electorates. And remember, a lot of their electorates have very large Muslim communities in there. Rather than spending their time trying to educate these people and have a sensible position. I note that there was no call for release of the hostages, as there never is in these circumstances, or any explanation of why Israel shouldn't respond to a terrorist act, which we would respond to as a country, and most other countries would. So really, they've put their personal political self-interest, and that's probably being generous, ahead of a principle. And unfortunately, you see this in the Labor left all the time.
Louise, some news today. The first time, we talked to you was about the statue of former Tasmanian Premier William Crowther. Your council actually removed it because of unproven and almost certainly false allegations he stole the skull of an Aboriginal person. So out went the statue. But now, is the left going to come after the museum there? There's research from Cambridge University uncover new details on a so-called prominent coloniser, Morton Allport. Apparently he traded Aboriginal remains, but now there are calls to change the name of a museum down your way that's named after him. Would you support that?
Categorically not, and this is exactly what we predicted, really, because, yes, you're right, the Hobart City Council voted to remove a statue of Dr William Crowther, who was very, very loved in the 1800s. He was a great man. He provided care to the sick people when they couldn't afford it, and other community projects and philanthropy. They voted to remove the statue, but the public's actually appealing that decision now, and there's a really strong case for the appeal, and that'll be heard in February. So Dr Crowther still stands, but exactly as predicted, there are more calls and more cases coming forward for removal of statues. So as I said at the time, this is inevitable. What are we going to see? Are we going to see street names, place names, buildings, museums, museum collections all deleted, destroyed, renamed? Because what we're doing, what's at play here is, of course, it's victimhood again, but it's also judging the 1800s by today's standards, and that's just blatantly unfair to do. And when it comes to the Dr Crowther statue, the people paid for that statue, and I think that's what's most disgusting in that situation is the council is moving something that isn't morally owned by them.
That's so true. I mean, it goes to what, Michael, you were saying, what the attitudes are they being taught? The kids are being taught to hate the past and to be obsessive about the past. But just quickly, Michael, I'm out of time, but I want to ask you quickly about the inflation figures today. Inflation down in October to 4.9%. Now, it was 5.6 in September. Big fall, coming after just a fall in consumer spending as well. Seems to me households are feeling the pinch, and we're not going to get that next interest rate rise that was threatened.
Well, I think that next interest rate rise is still on the agenda, but I think it's been moved into next year. I mean, these are one set of figures. They're going to wait for the quarterlies before they make a final decision. But look, it is good news. Everybody wants to see inflation come down and interest rates gradually return to something that's more manageable. But I wouldn't be popping the champagne at the moment. I think that the trend's good, but who knows what's going to happen in the new year, particularly after the Christmas period.
And of course, it reflects perhaps a fall in GDP as well, in the economy. So we shall see how it all works out. Michael Costa and Louise Elliott, thank you very much to you both. After the break, a new dirt book on the royals actually now names the royal who had allegedly wondered about the colour of Meghan Markle's baby, but the author says it's a terrible mistake. Was it really? And Nigel Farage in Australia, is he too nice for this reality show? And what are they doing to make him seem mean? Patrick Christie's after this. I mentioned on Monday the new book by Meghan Markle's confidant and propagandist Omid Scobie attacking the royal family. Yet again, it's mean and cold and out of touch and blah, blah, blah. But there's been a whoopsie. Now, the Dutch translation has had to be pulped because it included the name of the royal that Markle claims asked what colour her baby would be. Joining me from London is Patrick Christie, star presenter of GB News. Patrick, and the name of this royal, this allegedly racist royal, is?
Oh, am I allowed to say? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say.
I don't know. The law.
I'm not 100% sure if I'm allowed to say it, but I mean the point is either way. What this guy is trying to claim, right? What this guy is trying to claim is that it was a complete mistake that this name appeared. He doesn't know how he does it. It's lost in translation. But people are pointing out that how on earth can you get something lost in translation when it's just a name of somebody? And people are thinking this is just a shameless PR stunt. I mean, there's a couple of things to this. I mean, you arguably can't believe anything that this guy says. I mean, he's lied about his age before as well, so he can't even tell the truth about that. I mean, this is also just a complete and utter hatchet job on our royal family, saying things that Kate is, cold, frosty and coachable, etc. Meanwhile, Meghan was this beaming ray of sunshine. Obviously, William has got a temper on him, apparently, and there's a rift between King Charles and William. That's not gone down particularly well. But also people are saying, well, who are your sources on this? Because I think the closest he's ever got to a good source, frankly, is ketchup. He's not really plugged in at all. And Harry and Meghan surely have to distance themselves from this now because he's been essentially slagging off their family. But, of course, they won't do that.
Yeah, but there's so many details in this book that only could have come from Meghan Markle and Harry. So, spare me the, oh, no, they weren't my sources business. But, to go back to that deceit, because I hadn't considered it was actually a PR stunt. How can it be a translation error, an error by the translator, but he suddenly made up a name, or was it a name suggested to him or in the manuscript given to him by, Omid Scobie?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I'm kind of skirting around the edges here, but these were supposedly letters between Charles and Meghan. And so you can see why they might be trying to hint at the idea that there was some kind of typing error there and that is a problem that's gone out to print. But, I mean, if you remember the last time that his book came out as well, it was published in a couple of countries first, earlier on than it was expected. So that kind of boosted the old myth around it. He's come out and just said, look, we didn't know what we were doing. I'm really sorry. We've had to pulp this book. But, of course, it will get out there on social media. But, I mean, any chance of reconciliation whatsoever has now gone. But I actually went to Buckingham Palace yesterday to ask people if they'd ever heard of Omid Scobie. And not a single person could tell me that they had. So, maybe he's not quite as famous as he thinks, this guy.
Oh, just the one yes, no. I'm not going to ask you for the identity because there are legal things I don't quite understand about why we shouldn't, and it's probably unfair anyway. But the name of the royal who asked the question, is it a surprise or not?
Well, not necessarily, really. I mean, the big surprise is that they're making a massive deal of this, OK? So having spoken to a large number of people who I know who either are of colour themselves or from a mixed-race family and saying, this is actually a perfectly normal conversation that you would have about the upcoming birth of a child.
No, I know.
It is not actually meant in a racist way at all. So it's the fact that they're making a big deal out of it, really, which is the story.
Yeah. Well, if you say it's not a surprise, I think we know who it is then. Patrick, uproar in the latest season of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The star this year of the show is Nigel Farage, former leader of the Brexit Party, your fellow GB presenter, bête noire of the left. But it's caused problems, it seems, by being too nice. It's not turning out to be this raging, right-wing, racist, bully, hate preacher that they all wanted. So what are they doing about it?
OK, well, look, this is actually quite a big scoop that we managed to break at about 1 o'clock in the morning our time, so about 7 hours ago, 8 hours ago now. And ITV stand accused of conducting an investigation into Nigel Farage, where they've trawled through cameo videos that he used to do, where he would read out a script for money, not knowing what he was saying. They believe they've unearthed some kind of racist slur in that. I've seen what it is. It is genuinely a complete mistake and not the kind of thing that you would want to repeat on television anyway. They are planning on revealing this later on today as the first round of public voting opens up, knowing that Nigel can't comment on it because he's in the jungle. An ITV boss was recorded a couple of days ago being very, very rude about Nigel. Essentially, there's a hatchet job. Essentially, there's a hatchet job being done on Nigel in the jungle whilst he can't defend himself.
Patrick Christie's, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. That's it from me. Coming up next, Chris Kenny.